And we're going to begin on page 62 in your book. And I want to look at the definition at the top full paragraph where we talk about partnerships. So an associate, you want to know the definition for partnership. An association of two or more people to carry on a business as co-owners. And with partners, they share profits and losses. You just have to know the definition. You don't have tons of partnerships in real estate. It is prevalent, but it's not something that as a real estate agent you're going to worry about for the most part. As we go a little further, we talk about the differences between a limited partnership and a general partnership. You definitely want to know that limited partners, in the second paragraph of page 62, you definitely want to know that limited partners cannot be involved. They absolutely cannot be involved with the day-to-day operations of the business. Limited partners cannot be involved with the day-to-day operations of the business. General partners can. Limited partners only lose up to the amount of their investment, whereas a general partner can lose more, can lose everything that they've invested. On one side of the flashcard, artificial entity created under the law. That's your trigger words for corporation. I can't think of another time we use the word artificial in real estate qualifying course material. Then you flip the card over and you put corporation. And corporations are a big part of what we do in real estate. Real estate can be owned by a corporation. You as a real estate agent, you can actually set up a corporation. A lot of people don't know this, and we reference it very briefly in the book. State doesn't really test you on that, but again, I like to make sure that the material covers anything you'd really want to know as a real estate professional. So you can set up a corporation so that your broker, instead of paying you, pays the corporation. And there's liability reasons why you might want to do that, but it's not something you really want to do until you really know you love real estate and you're going to really make it your career. If you're only selling a few homes a year and you're doing it part-time, then I don't encourage setting up a corporation. It's a whole lot more paperwork. But there are benefits, and I would encourage you, if you have a lawyer friend to talk to look into it more. And to tell you the truth, the best way to determine whether you should have a corporation set up, besides everything I've already said, is when you speak to your sponsoring broker, ask them how many people in the office that they sponsor, that person manages, how many people have a corporation set up where they would actually, have their checks sent to the corporation. Ask them how that works out, because if in their office they don't have too many, that can give you some insight as well. And if there are, maybe they could talk to you about the ins and the outs. That's actually a great idea. Sometimes I shock myself. I get these ideas like, wow. But it's and it makes sense, right? If you think about it, why not? So a co-op is actually owned by a corporation. Always. Co-ops are always owned by a corporation. It's not optional. It's mandatory. Another thing with a co-op that we're going to talk about momentarily, especially as we talk about the key attributes of each, is that instead of getting a deed, because if you remember from last week, or from being a homeowner, a deed is your proof of ownership of that house. Well, when it comes to a co-op, you don't get a deed because you don't own the land, because a corporation, now the corporation owns the land for a co-op, okay? But you get what we call proprietary lease. And you'll see that spelled out at the second paragraph from the bottom of page 62. So proprietary lease is your proof of ownership of a co-op. So I would encourage you to start. As a matter of fact, a good thing to do right now is pull out a piece of paper. I want you to write really small, those co-ops, townhomes, and just regular typical real estate. Okay, so you want a piece of paper. You want to pull out a piece of paper, and you want to turn it landscape. You want to turn it landscape so it's like this, not like this, this. And what you want to do is don't limit yourself, but at the top, you want to put, let me just get this piece of paper again. So at the top, you want to put just single-family detached dwellings. Single-family detached dwellings. The next you want to put townhouses. Then you want to put condos, co-ops, and timeshares. Okay? I'm going to write them down. I just decided to do this out of the blue. I was going to have you just write everything down, but we might as well make it kind of organized, you know? So single family, townhouses, condos, co-ops, timeshares. I don't think I left any out. If I left any out, let me know. So a co-op has to be owned by a corporation. Any corporation can own a co-op. It just can't be an individual. Like I can't own a co-op. It has to be a corporation, because what happens with a co-op is you get shares of the corporation. That's what your proprietary lease represents, shares of the corporation. So technically, when you buy stock, stock represents shares of a corporation. So you own a little piece of it, but we say it's an indistinguishable piece, especially when it comes to common areas. But I'll talk about that in a moment. So the top of your page, you can't see the print because of the light. Single family, townhouse, condo, co-op, timeshares. I believe that's everything we're going to talk about. And what I want to do is I just want to go through and give you the key attributes. In other words, what exists at what. So if you get a multiple choice question on the state exam, or even more importantly, if you go out to a property and you see these different characteristics, you can think back to the day that we had this class and say to yourself, townhouse. So now that you have your sheet ready to go, we're going to talk about the key attributes of these various types of properties that we have in New York State. And it'll help you understand condos and cooperatives a lot more. So I'm just going to kind of give you a list of things, and then we'll go through the book and see what we might have left out. So with a townhouse, since that's your second column, a townhouse, you get a deed. So deed for a townhouse. You get a deed for a single family home. You get a deed for a condo. What should you put under co-op? Because everything that we put should be, well, with this type of property, you get a deed, but with this type of property, you get a what? So you know, like, what's the equivalent? It would show that you paid attention earlier. Yes, a proprietary lease. Stephanie, you are correct. So you want to put PROP for proprietary lease. You don't want to just say lease, because then I'm not sure that you're comparing that to an apartment, like an apartment that you rent with no ownership interest. Proprietary lease takes it up a notch compared to just a traditional lease when you rent property. Next, I want to talk about the lot size, like about the land that's equivalent. So with a single family home, you have a typical lot size for whatever's typical in the area. If let's say you're in Williamsville, you would have a lot size of, well, if you're in a village compared to outside the village of Williamsville, you'd probably have a lot size of anywhere from 70 by 120. So when you write out a lot size, you do 70, then a little X, 120. So it's a frontage by the depth. We always express lot sizes frontage by depth. Now, the thing with a townhouse, which is kind of interesting, is it's always a real skinny lot size. We're talking about 22 by 150 or 18 by 120. So why don't you just pick a number that's narrow? How about 18 by 150? We'll put 18 by 150. Now, very few like the other properties that you're dealing with, very rarely will they have a narrow lot. So there's a real good chance if it's a real narrow lot that it's going to be a townhouse. Okay. When we look at a condo, most of the time, 95% of the time, there will not be a lot size. Condos generally don't have a lot size because you don't own the common areas. When you have a condo ownership, you don't have ownership of the common areas. You have what we call an indistinguishable interest in the common areas. So it's all based on proportion. So if it's a 200 unit condo complex that you're in and you've got 800 square feet, you might own 5% of the common areas. So your ownership paperwork would specifically state that in there. It would say that, you own 5%, but we don't know if it's here, if it's there, if it's wherever it is. Okay. And the same thing goes for, like I'm giving you another term right now. Again, now we're filling out a blank sheet that we just made out. We're just doing this on the fly because why not have some excitement? I don't have any dancing girls or dancing boys here, but that's the closest I can make for excitement for a real estate class. So sometimes with a condo, they call it a patio home. Patio home used to be a new term. We kind of stole it from Florida and places south of New York State. And now they've kind of been around a while. We've had patio homes around for a while. That's when you drive into a community. It'll usually have like a sign that says something estates. And they'll all be like kind of similar looking properties, all spaced out really nice. It'll be a newer thing, it'll be under 20, 30 years old. So I'm telling you all this so that you know what to write under the land-related concept when it comes to a condo. So under condo, for lot size, you should put generally no lot size. That's what I would write down. Generally, no lot size. Okay. So Stephanie's asking, what's the difference between a townhouse and a patio home? Well, you might want to put condo and then under the word condo, put patio home in brackets, because I have never seen a patio home that wasn't legally set up as a condo. And what I'm going to do next is I'm talking about the land situation. Next, I'm going to talk about the architectural design of the different properties. Okay. I'll talk about that next. So with a condo, you generally don't have a lot size. So, well, okay, how do you know the lot size of anything? Well, you look at a tax bill. The tax bill will tell you 18 by 150. So if you look at a tax bill and it says 18 by 150, you could just about bet your bottom dollar that that's going to be a townhouse. If you see a lot size of 70 by 120, or it says 3 acres, or it's something larger, then it's probably not a funny type of ownership. It's probably not a condo. It's probably not a townhouse. It's probably not a co-op. It's definitely not resort property. I'll talk about that in a moment. But that actually raises another question. Which types of properties do you get a tax bill at? Well, we'll answer that question next. So the next column we have to answer is a co-op. A co-op doesn't have a lot size either because you don't own the land. You have the exclusive right to your apartment only. So you're going to put no lot size under co-op. And then under timeshares, timeshares won't have a lot size generally either, but you'll have to look at the deed. Let me tell you something about a deed. Most of the time when you read a deed backwards, so the deed has the legal description of the property, and you go through the deed and it says situated on a lot, and you go through the whole thing. You read the legal description of the deed. It's a paragraph that's about this long, and it talks about boundaries, and it's like the whole legal description from what a surveyor would do. the last numbers that are shown on a deed is the frontage of the property. Most of the time, what I'm telling you will be accurate. So if you go right to the last paragraph of a deed is only 1 or 2 pages, and you look at the last sentence, it'll have a number. And that number is the road frontage. And if it's a rectangular sized lot, then the next number going backwards from the last word you saw will be the depth. And when you're looking at it and you're going backwards, then it'll probably have the width again at the other end of the lot, and then it'll have again the other side. We have a thing in real estate that that you're going to learn if you haven't been here yet, is a meets and bounds description. METES, a meets and bounds description. And we begin at a particular POB. POB stands for point or place of beginning. And then we go around in an appropriate fashion, and we describe the boundary lines of that lot. And we always return back to the POB, or point or place of beginning. Okay, so that's just something helpful to know. And it's really helpful to know, particularly when you're dealing with properties that are in a rural area. Because in a rural area, sometimes the tax bill will just say 12 acres. And then you're like, well, now what do I do? Well, hopefully you know that you want to ask the owner for a survey, but they might not have a survey available to you. So then if they don't have a survey and you're looking at a tax bill, it doesn't tell you too much. Now you know that if you can get your hands on the deed, hopefully they have a deed around, then you can just read that backwards, and at least you know the road frontage. Because a property that has a lot of road frontage is worth a lot more than a real narrow lot that's irregular. Okay, an irregular lot means, because with road frontage, you can split up the lot. You can put a road down there that opens up to, you can like set up a subdivision. There's just tons of fun things you can do when you have lots of road frontage. But when you don't have much road frontage, then you've got to be real creative and get you have to get significantly more approvals from the municipality to do different things with that parcel. Lisa, does a seller have to show you their deed in order to represent them, or do their lawyers handle that? Lisa, no, you don't. They don't have to show you, and most real estate agents don't even ask for it. But if you watch one of our uploaded videos, I forget the name of it, but I'll look at, Lisa, if you send me a text to our 914 number, I will let you know which video talks all about deeds, okay? And I think you'll find it real useful. I just don't remember without seeing the list of them in front of me, okay? So it looks like, oh, Gino, you're funny. It looks like you're getting it. You got it. So, and Shanna, what we're doing is we're just making up a sheet with single family, townhouse, condo, co-op, timeshares. And I want to tell you all the key attributes, okay? So I promised you that we're going to talk about architecture next. And then after architecture, we're going to talk about the tax bill. So we're going to go back to single family home. Of course, if you don't already know, in terms of architecture, when we talk about single family homes, it can be anything. It can be a ranch, also known as a rambler. It can be a cape, 2-story of any sort. It can be anything. It could be a split level. Architecture doesn't matter in terms of a single family home. And of course, the definition for single family, that we're giving you the key legal attributes of each type of property. It can be multifamily home too, multiple dwellings. Like if you've got a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, all of that still applies. The reason why we usually only go from a 1 to a 4 family home, it's not easy to finance those properties. So that's why we don't, you don't hear us talk about it as much. Then you're talking about commercial type financing, and that's another whole thing which goes beyond the realm of what New York wants us to talk about in these courses, okay? So next we talk about architecture. So with single family, on my piece of paper, on this thing that you're developing right now, I would put any type of architecture applies. So now we look at townhouse, and a townhouse could be 1 or 2 story. There's in Tonawanda, there's a lot of one-story townhouses. But in other parts of the state, there's tons of two-story townhouses. When I sold real estate in Hamburg, right off of Camp Road, there was a subdivision. Actually, right near McKinley Mall, there's subdivisions full of townhouses. And I'll tell you another place. Tons of townhouses on Bayview Road and Big Tree Road. Big Tree Road, close, like between Seven Corners and what's the other street? Route 5. That's where we would see a lot of townhouses. So we know with a townhouse, it's got a narrow lot. So architecture, we can put down 1 or 2 story. And I also want to talk about something else. You own the ground beneath your unit. So usually you have a basement. You own the air rights above your unit. So you should write this down under townhouse. You own the ground, so the basement. You have air rights, so you want to write down air rights. You have a front lawn and a back lawn. You should write that down. Front lawn, back lawn, front lawn, back lawn. And you own all the same things with a single family home. So you can put, I don't know, you can put like little lines or just put, it's the same as townhouse. Or you could write it under single family and just put that's the same goes for townhouse. Turns out that with a condo, you don't have, you don't own the land under your condo. You don't own the land under the co-op. So you don't own the land under a condo. You don't own the land under a co-op. With a timeshare, you're really getting a deed based on an interval. And that's something you should add to the word deed. You get a deed, but it's based on some time frame. So I would put in brackets next to the word deed under timeshare. So under deed for timeshare, your last category, I would put time intervals. Time interval, that's what you want to put. So the next thing we were talking about was the ground and the situation with like the ground, okay? So with a co-op, you don't own the ground. With a condo, you don't own the ground. With a timeshare, you don't own the ground. Okay, so you don't own the ground. That means you don't own the basement. Now, some people say, well, I have a friend with a condo and they've got a storage thing below grade. Well, a storage unit is not the same as owning your basement because that's part of the common area. Usually, if you have a storage unit beneath your unit or near beneath your unit, there's probably an access area where several people that own in your property would be able to go to put their things, their storage things. So we have attached and detached. So this is in terms of dwellings. When you have a single family home that's just standing all by itself, we call that detached dwellings. That's what in appraisal, that's what we call that, detached dwellings. When you have a townhouse, you always share a common wall, always share a common wall. As a matter of fact, we were talking about architecture. That would be a good place to put that. Under townhouse, where we put 1 or 2 story, you need to put always shares a common wall. Always share a common wall. So we've added the townhouse that you share a common wall. You always have a common wall. Okay. So architecturally speaking, that was the next thing we were talking about. Condos, architecturally, it can be anything. It used to be years ago that a condo was an apartment complex. And then people say, especially like in the New York City area, people say, oh, they went condo, or are they going to go condo, or did they go condo? Particularly if you live there and you're like, oh yeah, I own my condo. They used to be apartments at one time, so they went through all the paperwork and they got it approved as a condo. Okay, so in this apartment building where there's individual units can be a condo. But remember, patio homes are freestanding, looks like little ranches on a piece of land, not sharing a common wall. So that's a condo too. Okay? The building that you take your classes in, that's what we call a business condo. Now New York isn't doing any more business condos. So now that's going to increase the value of anyone that owns business condos, because that's not going to even be an available option anymore. But business condos and residential condos all follow the same rules. I think I saw a question pop up here. Is a duplex side-by-side unit considered a townhouse? No, what makes a duplex is that there's one deed. There's not a deed to both sides. If there's a deed for both sides, then that's a townhouse. Okay, so if you look at the tax bill for the property and it's got an 18 by 150 or a narrow lot, like really narrow, like New York doesn't approve lot sizes that are that small. But if it's a townhouse, they do. So there's like a little bit more to it than just, you can't just look at the building and assume what it is. That's why it's always good to do a little research on the property before you go out there, just so you know what you're getting yourself into when you're going on a listing appointment. Okay, so we were talking about architectural design. So for condo, you should have put down no architectural design. Now, cooperatives also fell under the guise of an apartment building at one time. And there's a lot more co-ops that look like apartment buildings, whether they're small apartment buildings or big apartment buildings. You never see a co-op all by itself. But if you go to Hollamont in Ellicottville, and there's one other one, I don't remember the name of it, there's co-ops that are there. We don't have a lot of co-ops in Western New York. They're real sporadic. Here, there is nothing like downstate New York where they're all over the place. So with a co-op, it's however you want to write down that it's more like, architecturally speaking, it looks more like an apartment complex where there's multiple units, but it doesn't have to be big. It can be 3-4 units, and it can be co-op. The ones in New York City tend to be more, though. So I would put down looks more like apartment complex. And with timeshares, it can be anything. It can be anything. It's usually grouped in, it can be like a patio home setup. It can be an apartment complex where it's one building full of units. Timeshares can be anything. You just don't know. Okay, so I'm just going to put down anything under timeshare. Okay, so next we want to talk about tax bills. Well, single family home definitely gets tax bills, so you want to say yes for tax bills. Townhouse is a yes, gets a separate tax bill. A condo gets a separate tax bill. A co-op does not get a separate tax bill, so you want to put no for a co-op. Okay. And for timeshares, generally it's no. Generally, you want to put the word generally no. Okay? So what haven't we talked about? I want to get you actively involved. What have we not talked about that would help you differentiate one property type from another? I'll give you another one then, just to kind of keep this moving along. So another attribute we look at is whether an association is required or not. Some things require an association. Single family home does not need an association, so no association required. But some subdivisions are set up with like a mini association to pay for some common attributes. Like in Ransom Oaks, they've got an association for parts of it, not all of it, but for big parts of it. Townhouses, they're also optional. They're not mandatory. That's probably the most common question people get wrong. They assume that a townhouse has to have an association. I'd say 60% do. And it could be 55%. It's really not. So I would say no association is mandatory for a townhouse. But with a condo, it's absolutely necessary. Yes, 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 all day long, yes, for a condo setup. That's where you pay a monthly fee, which takes care of the common areas. It takes care generally of the exterior landscaping. Usually it will include garbage removal. We'll take care of plowing the streets, particularly if you're in a private, you're not on a public street, but you're like in a private setup there. It'll take care of the roof. It'll take care of anything that's exterior, nothing interior. That's usually what kills you on a timeshare is all the association fees, because you're paying every single month and you might only have 2-week ownership, 3-week ownership, 4-week ownership, but you're paying every single month that you don't live there, and it goes up and it goes up. And that's usually the big downside of ownership of a timeshare. So ownership of a timeshare, the big downside is having to pay the big homeowner association fees. Okay. All right. So we talked about the land, the building, getting permission to sell the property. I don't know what you want to call that, but in other words, you might want to come up with some way to write this down, but needing permission to sell the property. Of course, with a single family home, you don't need anyone's permission, well, except your wife if you're married. So you need permission. You need permission to sell the property. In other words, single family home, you don't need permission. You don't need permission to sell the property. With a townhouse, you don't need permission either. I say permission, I mean like from some other entity that's not you. Now with a condo, it's not that you need permission, but you might need what they call the right of first refusal with a condo. So I'm going to put in there right of first refusal. And that's not every condo. That's only a portion of them. It all depends on where you're at. In other words, the association reserves the right to buy your unit if you try to sell it to someone and they can match it and they want to, they can. But that's not always the case. For a co-op, you absolutely need permission to sell it. And by virtue of permission to sell it with a co-op, they have a thing called a co-op board. You should put that under that column. So we have a co-op board or a cooperative. Co-op stands for cooperative. So a co-op board has to approve the new buyer. That's all the same size and there's 5 units. That means each one owns 20% of the property, and that's what your proprietary lease would reflect, 20% ownership. So the co-op board would be made up of members of the board. Now, usually it's many more units than that, and the people are elected, and it's like a whole political sort of thing. And there's actually, in New York City, there's actually a New York City co-op like board commission thing, and what they do is there's a professional name for it. I don't recall what it is right now, but this entity makes sure that the co-op board doesn't play games. I remember talking to one of our continuing ed students from New York City. We have a lot of people from all over, out-of-state people take our online courses for their continuing ed, and they're real like they come back every 2 years because they really enjoy it. They like the good customer service and everything they get. And you get to know, you get to know your students after a while. And once in a while, when I help out on the phones, I'll talk to like some of our students, and I kind of get into a little bit of the nuances of what's going on in their area, just to share, because it's a whole different world from what we're used to in upstate New York. And I remember one lady was telling me about how a celebrity, like a well-known celebrity, like Mia Farrow or someone like that, they wanted to move into a property on the I think the west side or the east side, I think the east side. And long story short, and again, this was a co-op, okay? Long story short, the co-op board did not want to approve, Mia Farrow or whoever it was, somebody in that genre, because they didn't want all the paparazzi and the celebrity to affect the whole, like they had a quiet setup, and they didn't want reporters and people lingering around to try to catch her every move so they could get pictures and sell it, and all that. They didn't want all that drama. They just wanted to keep everything quiet. And that's all part of what you go through, and you have to put together a package for the co-op board to approve the person. You're basically selling the person who's buying your property to the co-op board so that they get approved. It's a whole production. And you learn all about how to do that when you're actively involved in that kind of real estate. Nothing any of you would have to learn for the state exam, or even that you'll be involved with up here. It's nothing that dramatic. Let me look at some of the questions that we've got here. So, okay, so my video froze. Do you have to pay association fees for a co-op? Yes, you do pay monthly association dues for a co-op. Let me tell you one other thing while I just thought of it. Another thing under a co-op, because I don't know if your page is full, but mine's kind of full. I've got like a lot of information on my page. That means we've got most of this is done now, so this is good. So with a co-op board, you get a statement every year. You want to write down under co-op, you get a yearly statement of what taxes you can deduct. So of your taxes and interest. Okay, so you get, in other words, instead of getting a statement from the bank, you get the statement from the co-op board. Why do you think you get a statement from the co-op board? You just want to take a moment and think about that. Why would you get a statement from the co-op board? The reason why you get a statement from the co-op board of your annual taxes and interest that you can deduct is because it's owned by the corporation, and you're a shareholder in that corporation. So technically, if you follow that example I gave earlier, where it's 20% ownership because there's 5 units in this co-op building, then you would each write 20% of the annual taxes. So school, town, and county taxes would be deducted 20%. You would get 20% pro rata share. And yeah, so that's how that works. Okay. So let me look at your other questions here. Savannah, when you have a condo and you sell, can you get back the money that you have given for amenities? Anything that you do on the inside is, as long as it doesn't violate the association rules. Like there's rules on modifications that you make, you can and cannot make. If you violate that, well, then you're going to get in trouble. And they usually will do a walkthrough to make sure that you haven't done anything like that. I don't like anything you do to help sell a property will stay with the property if it's attached. We follow the same rules for fixture. If you remember the definition of fixture, it's something that was personal property at one time that was attached to the real estate in such a way that it became part of the real estate. Okay? So you generally don't get money back for anything into a condo because you own the condo. Okay, with a condo, you own it. Next question from Gino, do co-ops have to follow the discrimination laws? Like, are there loopholes because of lease ownership situation? No, generally, they do have to follow the Federal Fair Housing Act as part of what you follow for anything to do with real estate. Anything, renting, owning, yeah, anything, you have to follow that. So the question is like the way it's attached. If removal of the item damages what's left or leaves it in an undesirable fashion, like goopy glue or holes from the screws that were put in there, then it's considered to have been a fixture and should have been left with the property. So that's the test. That's the common layman's term for a fixture. So if you do make modifications, can you sell your condo or co-op for a larger amount, even if the remaining properties are selling for the same amount? Sometimes you do things to your condo. Co-op has really strict rules. You really want to make sure you follow the rules. Like painting can even be limited on. Like if you have a condo, you can't paint your front door some bizarre color. It ruins the homogeneous nature of what people would observe in that neighborhood. So you have to follow the rules. You might not even be able to paint your doors a color other than what's approved, which is usually what everyone else has theirs as. But again, that's if it's attached. And I was starting to explain to you a moment. I don't think I actually finished my thought. So we have attached dwellings and detached dwellings. Single family homes that are just all on their own, we call that detached. Attached dwellings are when you share a common wall. So a townhouse is considered attached dwellings. If you do make modifications, can you sell your condo or co-op for? Yeah, I mean, it depends on your modifications. And this applies to any real estate. It all depends on the desirability and are you raising the quality of your property. If you're making it more, you might need to make modifications to your property just to be able to get it sold. Like you might not even attract buyers without doing these things. The most common modification people make to their property in general is landscaping. You know, if you don't have good curb appeal, you're not even going to get people inside to see how great it looks. And if you're in a neighborhood where people don't take care of their property, then that can also affect you too. And that's another whole long story that we can't get into tonight. So generally, you will get more than you would have got had you not made those modifications. Oh, okay. All right. So let's look at our sheet here. We'll finish our sheet and we're going to move along here. So under timeshares, we're talking about like any kind of oddball things. Timeshares, they will also give you a statement of what you can deduct. So you want to put statement of deductions. That's what I would call it. A statement of deductions is a good way to put it. A statement of deductions I would list under timeshares as well. And then I would say that's about it, because with a single family home, you pay your own taxes. Everything is, your interest is deductible following the new guidelines that since the Tax Reform Act was put into place. There's the limits on your property. Don't forget the $10,000 rule too for property taxes. It's capped at $10,000. So if your taxes are $25,000, you can only deduct $10,000 in the U.S. It's that's a new federal rule that went into place. Okay, so hopefully you have a better understanding. Now you can have one piece of paper where you can just look at everything and say, okay, now I know the key attributes of one property over another. Another thing I want you to add to a condo that's different than you won't get it with a single family home or a townhouse is you'll get specifications about the property. You get like a prospectus. A prospectus that the current owner has, and this is important. Here's a WIFM. What's in it for me? Why do I care? You haven't heard me talk about that in a while. Because when you list a property and it's a condo, you want to ask the owner, do you have a copy of the prospectus? I hope you're writing this down. Do you have a copy of the prospectus so that we can show that to the next owner, as well as so that buyers can look through it and make sure that everything's in order? The prospectus lists all the details of the property from when it was either converted or set up as a condominium. It also talks about reserve funds, talks about rules and regulations as well. So the prospectus is really important. All right. So good. That's good information. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on now. We're going to still look at page 62, 63, and just see if there's anything that we left out. So at the bottom half of 62, please don't forget you do need to know anything that's bold or italicized. You want to look at the definition of syndicate. That has shown up on the state exam a number of times. I believe it's on the school exam too. Syndicate is a joining together of two or more people or firms to carry out one or more business projects. We compare that in contrast to a joint venture, though. Notice a difference in the definition. In contrast, a joint venture is an organization of two or more people or firms to carry out a single project. So please make up a flashcard for that. That's super important. Okay? So we really did talk about all of this at the bottom of 62. We know that a corporation, bottom paragraph of 62, a corporation owns a co-op. Page 63, fee simple title for condos, that's a deed. So we know that that's the case for a condominium. Second paragraph talks about architectural issues, and we've already addressed that. You don't know. You can't look at a building and say, oh, yes, that is definitely a condo. Or, oh, no, that's definitely, you can't even look at a duplex and say, okay, that's definitely a townhouse. Just looking at it, you need to see the tax bill. You need more information before you could just drive by and just assume that it's a particular type of legal setup. Okay. Third paragraph, just give that a cursory review. We talk about a separate tax bill for a condo, and you can mortgage. That's another thing too. I want you to add that to your list. I told you we'd go through the list and see what else might apply. So something else that I would add is the property mortgageable? Painting is a modification, Shayna. Yes, painting is definitely a modification. So single family home, obviously we know that's mortgageable. You want to add that to our list. Townhouse is mortgageable. Now condos are a little less mortgageable. There's a few more rules. There's certain rules that FHA has to approve the complex, the condo complex, or the setup, or the subdivision that the condo's in. Still mortgageable, but there's a few more rules. So I would put it's mortgageable, but stricter. Mortgageable, but stricter. A co-op is very tough. Like you can't just go get a mortgage super easy. Because you don't own, you have an apartment and you're getting a proprietary lease. So you've got to put a lot of money down. So for a co-op, you want to write down very limited mortgage opportunities. So we're on page 63 here. We talked about homeowner association fees. We've already done that. We talked about townhouse ownership. Townhouse ownership, the fourth paragraph from the bottom. We did all of that. Nothing more here that you need to know that we haven't discussed. Talk about timeshare. So the thing with a timeshare is that when the question on the state exam says resort, bells and whistles should go off. When you see resort, you should think of timeshare. So one side of your flashcard has resort, the other side you want to put timeshare. Done. That's what you need to know to get 2 points on the exam. Then at the bottom, we look at encumbrance. Please know the definition for encumbrance. Encumbrance is like real estate 101. It's a right or interest held by a party who's not the owner of the property. Encumbrances can be divided into two general groups. We have financial encumbrances, and in real estate, we would call that a lien, and restrictive encumbrances, which control the way you can use the property. It's also known as usage encumbrances. And that continues on 64, but that's all we cover as far as this section goes. Turn to page 136. We're going to look at page 136 in your book now. 136 is in chapter 5. Okay. And we're going to talk about all these. Now, not too long ago, we did talk about the police powers of government. That's the right of the government to kind of control the way you use your real estate. They control the fact that you need to get a building permit. They control that you need a variance. Don't forget, when you do your flashcards, one side of your flashcard for variance should be hardship. So hardship on one side, variance on the other side. Bam, now you got another answer, okay? If you can't get a variance, then you want to apply for a special use permit. Special use permits are not permanent, so that's why we try to go for a variance first. The Latin term ad valorem, we covered that not too long ago. Ad valorem means according to valuation. And then we look at condemnation. You really want to know condemnation. It's almost always on the state exam. It's like real estate 101 when we talk about condemnation. Through a condemnation suit. So condemnation suit, that goes together. You'll see why in a moment. A governmental agency or quasi-governmental agency may exercise the right of eminent domain. So very rarely will you have condemnation discussed without talking about eminent domain. They go hand in hand. Condemnation and eminent domain go hand in hand. The right of eminent domain is the right, and then a condemnation suit is the way they take private property for public use. Next, we'll talk about escheat. That's if you die and you don't leave a will or qualified distributees, your property can't escheat to the state. Bottom half of the page, we talk about property taxes, as well as assessments. Know the phrase that's in bold, dark print there, in rem. Please know in rem. In rem is against the property as compared to the person. And that's, again, the person would be the owner of the property. That's in the middle of page 136. Okay? We talk about assessed valuation, and we break it down into mills. You should know for test purposes, 1 mill is equal to 1/10 of 1 cent. 1 mill is equal to 1/10 of 1 cent. You need to know that there's a chain. You should know chain. 66 feet to a chain. 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet. So 5280. 5280 is what you want to know for 1 mile. An acre is probably the most common thing we use in real estate. 43,560. 43,560 square feet in an acre. Circumference and radius, give it a quick cursory review, but it's hardly ever shows up on the state exam. I also want to bring to your attention something at the bottom third of the page. New York State does not have any mandated zoning laws. All issues are left up to the individual municipalities. And you'll notice that if you go to some real rural communities, particularly southeast and southwest of the Buffalo area and northeast of Erie County, there's some really crazy things people do. And that's, again, because if the local municipality doesn't enforce zoning or have zoning in place, you drive by a house that's a single family home and a trailer next to it, and God only knows what else, next to it. So zoning laws really, it's part of the police powers of government, and it's a way that we really make sure things stay in a homogeneous nature to maximize value for everyone, okay? Now we're going to go to the gap part of the book. Please turn to the gap part of the book. We're going to look at page 26. The gap part of your book has a green tab, and then the page numbers start all over again. So go to page 26. And at the top paragraph, we talk about flip taxes. You should know for test purposes that when you hear the term flip tax, you should think of a cooperative. Flip taxes are associated with co-ops. That's all. And not all co-ops have flip taxes in place. As we read through there, we talk about how flip taxes can be broken down. Just give it a quick review. Very rarely are you tested on the per share amount or flat fee amount. Items 3, 4, and 5 on page 27. Very rarely will you be tested on that. So just give it a cursory review, which means read through it once. Probably don't even need to do a flashcard on anything. The only thing so far that really jumps out at me on page 26 and 27 is know what a flip tax is. I would know the item in the middle of page 27. Please know that 95% of flip taxes in New York are paid by the seller. In the middle of 27, you definitely have to know the term condop, C-O-N-D-O-P. So when a building when a building follows condo rules and they have a co-op legal structure. So condo rules and a co-op legal structure, we call that a condop. And on the video that we send you, they get into there's a nice insert there that gives you some good information on that. We again let's define that condop, okay? Condop, so the freedom to sublet, putting an approximate minimum down payment of 10% for closing, a relatively easy board or no board approval are key characteristics. Now, hopefully, as you're reading this, you're saying to yourself, wow, this sure is not like a co-op because I need co-op board approval, but I don't need it with a condo most of the time. Closing costs for a condop are similar to a cooperative, which means much lower than that for a condominium. So with a condominium, you have a real property interest. With a condop, I should say with a cooperative, so with a cooperative, you don't have a real property interest like you do with a condominium. We define a corporation again for you in greater detail at the bottom half of the page. And please know the definition of homestead. This has been on the state exam as well. Homestead, the land that is owned and utilized as the family home, of which some portion of its value is generally protected from unsecured debts and judgments. Okay? We talk about homestead exemption at the bottom of 27. Just give that box a cursory review. Now we're going to look at page 72. Page 72 in the same section. We just defined homestead. Make sure to read through it again. Next, we look at approved assessing units. Approved assessing units are certified as having a completed revaluation program that implements a system of real property tax administration, which would be considered eligible based on the latest completed assessment roll. Okay? That's called approved assessing unit. Then equalization. This is also on the state exam. Definitely going to see equalization. The attempt by raising or lowering of assessed values to make, for tax purposes, assessments more equal. In other words, think of equalized. Typically, this is done when a municipality fails to perform revaluations on a regular basis. So if you're in a community like, I know as soon as I say it, things will change, but let's say West Seneca, and they're like at 27% last I heard of what the true market value is. So instead of having revaluations done frequently for whatever their reason is, usually it's a budgetary issue, they'll just have an equalization number that they use. So you take whatever the current assessment is of the property, you multiply it by this equalization number, and that gives you what the fair market value of the property should be. The problem is when you use equalization, it's not as accurate as doing regular ongoing revaluations. The state actually incentivizes municipalities to do regular ongoing revaluations. Most municipalities, they say that it's not enough money, so it's not worth it. But other ones find that it's better to do that. It's complex, but nothing you need to worry about for test purposes. Let's look at special assessment district. Geographic areas designed to pay for infrastructure costs for a specific project that benefits a specific area. That's all you need to know about that. SCAR is next. SCAR stands for Small Claims Assessment Review. When we talk about SCAR, we're talking about the second step of the assessment challenge process. And sometimes the assessor can make an adjustment right there. And that's like a long topic we can't get into right now. But then, if it doesn't go so well, then you go to what we call the local board of assessment review. The local board of assessment review is where you make your case, you follow a protocol, you have comparable sales of properties that are really comparable, and that's where you make your argument. And I always encourage people, actually, has anyone here ever challenged their assessment? Let me know if you have. I'd just be curious to know, since most of you said that you've owned homes at one point or another or currently do. But we mentioned the first step, you. Now, if that doesn't go so good, the final step you have as a typical homeowner is doing a SCAR hearing, small claims assessment review. So if a homeowner is dissatisfied with the decision of the local board of assessment review, this is one of the two final options, the other being a tax certiorari proceeding in state Supreme Court. You're rarely tested on that part. And then we talk about how SCAR hearings are allowed only for owner-occupied 1 to 3 family residences, as well as owners of vacant land not large enough to accommodate a residential dwelling, and must be initiated within 30 days of the filing of a final assessment roll. So this is all good stuff. Congratulations, Savannah, for winning against your landlord. What else do we have here? So we're going to go up to page 74. Page 73, we talk about property taxes and assessments. I kind of overviewed what the first few paragraphs discuss. But if the total, this is when we were talking about appropriation, okay? So since most towns are already operating, it's not like they're a brand new town and they have to set everything up. They already have a tax levy. So if 1.8 million, it'd be a very small town that we're talking about here, total tax levy of 1.8 million, you divide that. Well, actually, you know what? Let me fix what I just said. I misspoke. The tax levy is what they need to operate the town. The total taxable value, which makes more sense because 1.8 million is like a little town. So the total value of all the property in whatever this municipality is that we're talking about is $49 million. It's still a small town. So 49 million divided by 1.8 million, which is how much money the municipality needs to function. It might be a village, it might be a little tiny town. So the tax rate is 0.037. That's the tax rate for that municipality. Now, that doesn't mean that counts school tax. That doesn't mean it counts county tax. So, you've got multiple layers of taxes to deal with when you're living in New York State. In the middle of the page, we talk more about mills. Please don't forget that a mill is 1/10 of 1 cent. In the middle of the page, we talk about the assessed value of a property is of $120,000. We multiply that by 37, which is the given tax rate. Then we divide it by mills. So 4,440,000 divided by 1,000 gives you tax on that property. Mills will make the numbers really big because a mill is so tiny. So $4,400 essentially is your taxes. If anybody here lives in a home that's assessed for about 120,000, tell me if I'm close. The taxes on a property that's school, town, and county taxes, that's assuming you don't, from my experience as an appraiser, okay? Let me know if I'm close. That's just using my experience here. So if your assessed value is around 120,000, your taxes would be around $5,400 to $5,500 a year. That's for everything. We have 15 people here. Anybody close? Anybody a little bit more? 150,000? Anybody live in a $150,000 assessed property? Well, I'll look back in a moment. Just don't want to hold up the class. We're almost done though. So bottom of 73, we talk about the tax assessor. The tax assessor Now, you might get lucky and have a real easy question like this. It'd be a multiple choice question, of course, 4 choice. I don't know if you have any exemptions or veteran things or any kind of, usually it's, Gino, I'm assuming you're not a senior citizen. I haven't seen you in real life, but you don't sound like one on the phone. Because if you get a senior exemption, that saves you money as well. But your taxes would be over $9,500 a year if it's a $200,000 house. Again, that's based on my experience. And of course, if you're telling me you're in Angola, it could be $11,000, But yeah, so I was talking about the easiest question you might ever see, which is, which of the following individuals is responsible for ascertaining property taxes and like property taxes on a property? And that's usually your tax assessor will be the option. They might have the building inspector, they might have the town councilman, they'll have some silly choices as well. Okay, well, that's interesting. So if you look at your tax bill, Gino, you're assessed at $217,000, or is that what you think it's worth? Because you got to look at the tax bill. Usually tax bills, they're not always, oh, you got the new assessment last month. Okay. I would love if you actually receive something that you can send us a text me a picture of that. If you get a chance, just to keep me in the loop and make sure that I kind of know what's going on, I'd appreciate that. Yeah, send me a picture if you have a copy of your tax bill. And I just want to check and see, because I don't know if Cheektowaga is at full value or not. If you got new assessments, it sounds like they might have done a revaluation. And I didn't know that Cheektowaga was keeping up. For the longest time, Cheektowaga was way, way behind. Okay. Next page is 74, page 74. So New York wants to make sure that you know that there are 4 grounds in New York to challenge a tax assessment: excessive assessment, unequal assessment, unlawful assessment, and misclassified assessment. So make sure you read through and just be comfortable with this here. You should know that excessive assessment is the most common one that you use when you get your new assessment and you feel that you're being overassessed, and then you look at the comparable sales, and the comparables are very similar to yours, hopefully, and they're lower. That's a great basis for you to challenge your assessment. Page 77, we talk about condos and co-ops. So this shouldn't take too long. I just want to make sure you're familiar with the terms, because CONDOP will show up on the state exam. At least a lot of students tell us they see it there over and over. So a building that includes condominium and cooperative ownership in the same structure. If you know that, you'll be good. So subscription agreement is next. The contracts to purchase shares of stock in a co-op corporation. So you should know, on one side of your flashcard, you want to put down subscription agreements, and on the other side, cooperatives. You don't have these with condos. So subscription agreements go with cooperatives. You could add that to the list that we just made up as well. Now, the other thing you want to know, as far as for New York State test purposes, is we call it subscription agreements for co-ops, but what is the equivalent thing called for condos? The equivalent thing for condos is called a letter of intent. You should know that for test purposes. Letter of intent for condos. We define offering plan at the bottom of the page, conflict resolution, noise, etc. House rules are generally more detailed than items found in the proprietary lease. So you need to know an alteration agreement sets forth the rules for making any changes to the property. Know the definition of share loan. Look at the co-op recognition agreement. And I want to look at the definition of sponsor with you. The owner or developer, so the owner or developer of the condo or cooperative, we call that the sponsor. Now, the sponsor, they set up the board of directors. They do all the initial things because they're the ones that are setting it up. Read through the co-op policy statement or the CPS1 phase. Just give it a quick cursory review. And then we overview cooperatives at the bottom of page 78, and it continues on to the top of page 79. Okay. So give the balance of the page just a cursory review, nothing major there jumping out. And try really hard to make things bold or italicized, or both if it's really important, so that you know you've got to know it for test purposes. So we had a good night. We learned a lot about condos, co-ops. Now when you drive by, you have a better feel for what the heck you're looking at. I'm almost done.